It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. If you find a VHS tape titled Professor Egghead's Adventures, don't watch it. Teddy's VHS collection never really came up in conversation. Sure, occasionally I'd say something about the oblique pop culture reference t-shirt he wore, and I recall having a discussion or two about his obsession with 90s sitcoms, but most of our time together was spent talking about the strangeness of the locals. I originally moved to Prague to squeeze out as much fun from my 20s as I could in a cost-effective manner. Beer was cheaper than water, rent was infinitely more affordable than San Fran, and there's something to be said about dating in the porn capital of the world. Teddy's reasons for moving to Prague, on the other hand, were a bit more cryptic. Whenever I'd ask him about his departure from the States, he'd wax poetic about the dark Gothic streets, about the strangeness of the city, about how he could feel Kafka's perpetually confused spirit drifting through the subways. But it wasn't until one rum-soaked evening that he gave me something concrete. "Oh, you can also find some pretty niche VHS tapes here," he said, "and I like collecting VHS tapes." Maybe he wanted me to press the subject further. Maybe he wanted to show me his collection, but to be honest, I didn't care. I liked the dude. He was weird, but I liked him. Frail and covered in adult acne, Teddy was funny-looking and meek, but the guy had a heart of gold. Whenever I found myself lost in the absurd bureaucracy of the city or was looking for an explanation to the strange customs of the Pragas, Teddy was more than happy to help. He'd moved to the city just a year before me, yet somehow he'd managed to get a grasp on the strange consonant-filled lingo of the locals, and knew of just about every expat-friendly gem hidden around the dark alleys. We were on friendly enough terms to be conflict-free roommates, and occasionally grab a drink together. I liked the dude, I just didn't want to enter "check out my weird hobby" territory. It wasn't until he went missing that I saw his collection. Now, a regular VHS tape fits about 4 episodes of a 20-minute show. Judging by the sparse amount of space available in Teddy's room, he had enough tapes to stay occupied for weeks. Whilst Teddy was privy to all the drama of my personal life, I didn't know much about his. I never met any of Teddy's friends, but I presumed he had some. For the first 2 weeks of his absence, I assumed that Teddy had just gone on some spontaneous hiking trip with some friend I'd never heard about. One worried phone call from his father dispersed those illusions. Teddy was missing, and Teddy only had one friend in Prague: me. His father flew in from Maryland, and for 6 months he stayed in his son's cramped room. It was miserable rooming with a grieving father, but the guy continued covering Teddy's share of the rent, and I didn't want to be soulless. For 6 months he searched the city for some sort of evidence that his son was alive, but Teddy's disappearance was total. I had no leads, the police had no leads, and after half a year of searching, Teddy's father ran out of hope. Long after it became clear that his son wasn't coming back, Teddy's father flew back home to hold a memorial service. They invited me to come and speak at the service. He even offered to cover my airfare to Baltimore, but I declined. I didn't know Teddy well enough to speak to his grieving family, and traveling across the Atlantic is about as pleasant as a sleep deprivation experiment. Instead, as his family gathered to mourn, I made my way to Teddy's VCR. I was going to put on a Random Friends episode. Teddy seemed to have really enjoyed that show, but when I tried to pop in the cassette, there was resistance from the machine. The slot was already filled with a different tape. Adventures of Professor Egghead, Season 1, Episodes 1 to 4. Well, to pay my respects, I figured I'd do my best and try to indulge in Teddy's weird hobby. I pushed the tape back into the machine and pressed play. A coffee shop flickered to life on the screen. At first glance, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with it. A group of teens gathered with laptops in what looked to be a study room. Out by the window, 2 friends had an animated conversation. A small line of people dressed in grey office garb stood in line waiting for their coffee. But the longer I watched the coffee shop scene play out, the more I noticed something was off. The teens relentlessly typed away at their computers, but the screens of their laptops were off. The conversation by the window was filled with excited hand gestures and bouts of laughter, yet the two friends made no sound when they moved their lips. The line of office workers stood patiently in line, but no orders were ever filled. The whole coffee shop seemed stuck in the same 30-second loop that repeated over and over. It was as if everyone was waiting for something. Sitting behind the thick screen of Teddy's television, I waited as well. It was faint at first. I even paused the tape to see whether the sound wasn't coming from my neighbour's apartment. But soon enough it became clear the noise was originating from the television. Somewhere off-screen a live studio audience was clapping and cheering, anticipating the arrival of a beloved character. Then the door opened, and he entered. The studio audience hollered with joy as he appeared on screen, but my stomach went flush with discomfort. This man, this creature, this thing that stood at the entrance of the coffee shop defied all reason. The face of a human, a desperately tired human, drooped from his egg-shaped body. Over his stubby limbs he wore a dirty lab coat, and the sparse nest of hair on his pointed scalp looked like it hadn't been washed in years. But it was his eyes that stoked true discomfort in my core. Bloodshot and lined with yellow grime, they stared straight into the camera. "I am Professor Egghead," the abomination screamed in a queer accent drenched in anger. "I have come here to awaken myself for another day of science." The studio audience's joyous clapping turned to wild laughter, yet no one in the coffee shop found the creature's outburst funny. They all seemed scared. With rage-filled stomps, the egg-shaped being lumbered his way past the frightened business folk to the front of the line. "I demand boiled water," he screamed. "I demand boiled water that has been strained through crushed beans of the coffee plant. If I am to get any science done on this day, I must have caffeine coursing through my powerful veins." Everyone in the coffee shop seemed wholly uncomfortable with the existence of the Eggman. His presence radiated a fury throughout the entire establishment, but it was the young barista he was facing who received most of his ire. She looked to be on the edge of a panic attack. "I'm sorry, sir," she mumbled, biting her lip in discomfort. "I don't understand you." "No one understands the Egghead," he screamed, raising the nubs of his arms to the sky. "No one will ever understand the Egghead." Well, this drove the studio audience wild. A deafening bout of canned laughter boomed from the television. With a deep-seated confusion in my heart, I cut it off with a remote and went on the balcony for a cigarette. For a while I tried to make sense of why Teddy would watch something so unhinged, but those thoughts didn't stick around for long. Teddy was a weird guy who was into weird things. Trying to understand his tastes was just as futile as the 6-month search effort. A part of me wanted to believe that he was still hiding somewhere in the smoggy city that stretched out beyond the balcony, but I knew the truth. Teddy was gone, and somewhere out in Baltimore his family was gathered around a corpseless funeral saying goodbye. His father cried a lot, just about every night for the first couple of months. It wasn't until I put on the headphones to drown out a grown man's sobs that I realized how thin the walls of the apartment were. Even muffled through blaring music, those 2 a.m. howls were scratched into my memory. Standing on my balcony, alone, hearing faint echoes of the man's wails, I realized I needed a drink. As I rushed out of the house in search of company, however, the television screen in Teddy's room caught my eye. The screaming egg creature was still staring at the camera, stuck in an angry shout. If Teddy was around and he sat me down to watch that madness, I probably would have lasted longer. A twinge of guilt sparked in my chest for never humoring Teddy's obsession. As soon as I resumed the tape, the cafe was replaced with a barber shop. Much like the previous scene, there was an air of artificiality surrounding everything on the screen. A heavy middle-aged woman hovered over the single customer that the barber shop had, with scissors in her hands, yet she never made a single cut. Another employee was using a broom to clean up the remains of a previous haircut, but he never actually disposed of the hair. He just pushed it around the floor in a circle. Even the bright-colored fish in the barbershop aquarium seemed to be swimming around in a steady formation. The barbershop was stuck in a familiar 30-second loop, waiting for something to happen. After a minute or two, the cheering of the studio audience started to reverberate through the quiet room. "I am Professor Egghead," the mad creature raved as he burst through the door. "I demand that the dead cells be removed from my scalp with sharp knives so I can be born anew." His words were much angrier than before. The egg-shaped monstrosity was foaming at his mouth with rage, but his eyes still seemed comatose. "I am Professor Egghead, and I demand your attention," he yelled, impotently waving his short arms. The studio audience found his frustration hilarious. Everyone in the barbershop was doing their best to look away, but the malformed scientist would not be ignored. He wobbled up to the occupied chair and started to nudge it, making the hairdresser's job impossible. "Please, sir, could you just wait for your turn?" she finally said, doing her best to look away from his horrible, suffering eyes. "No," Professor Egghead screamed. "I demand attention now. I demand my scalp be cleansed of filth so that I can wholeheartedly commit my egg-shaped body to science." With one swift motion, the nightmarish creature grabbed the man in the chair and threw him to the ground. There was stunning force in those stocky little limbs of his. With a spine-chilling crack, the innocent customer slammed skull first into the floor. He lay there, unmoving. The studio audience saw the random act of violence as the pinnacle of comedy. "There are no more customers for you to serve," Professor Egghead screeched as a faint trickle of blood crawled across the white floor. "It is now time for you to serve the Egghead. It is now time for you to cleanse my scalp." With clumsy effort, the creature climbed up on top of the chair. The hairdresser was extremely distressed, but the audience found the Eggman's climb to be deserving of raucous applause. "Bring out the knives and alter my appearance," he screamed, kicking his stubby legs in frustration. "I am a busy man, and there is science to be done. Do what I demand." For a moment it looked like the hairdresser was going to say something, like she was going to decline the malformed maniac's service, but she reconsidered. With shaking hands, she grabbed a hold of the greasy tufts of hair on his oval scalp and started to cut. "I am Professor Egghead," the creature screamed, looking straight into the camera. "I always get what I desire. All shall be given to me in the name of science." It was as if he could see me, as if his tired eyes were reaching past the television screen and trying to bring me into his demented world. A glimpse into Teddy's confounding media diet was enough for me. I still didn't understand why the guy would watch the tape, but I was certain I wanted to turn it off. I reached for the remote with my sweaty hands. Before I could turn off the television, the scene changed again. For a moment I was sure my eyes were playing tricks on me, that I was having some sort of psychotic break with reality. But the longer I looked at the screen, the more certain I was of what I was seeing. I desperately scrolled through my phone searching for Teddy's father's number, but I kept my eyes glued to the screen. A colourful fast food restaurant flickered to life on the television. The line to the counter stood still. The customers held their burgers in anticipation but never ate, and somewhere off in the distance the studio audience started to clap. 2 rings. Teddy's father picked up right away. I found your son," I said. The red uniform was an unusual choice of clothing, and the beginnings of a patchy beard were starting to grow on his face. But I recognized Teddy right away. He was standing behind the counter, nervous, as if he knew what was awaiting him. "Yeah, you found my son?" said the voice on the phone, shaking with breathlessness. Where's my boy?" I tried to explain what was happening, but I kept tripping over my words. The tape, the Eggman, the insane eyes. I didn't know where to start. Before I could gather my thoughts into something coherent, the television exploded in another wave of celebration. I am Professor Egghead. The fever dream boomed from the screen. I demand the grilled carcass of an animal between 2 pieces of processed wheat. I must receive nourishment before I indulge in the science.
Sorry, sir, Teddy whimpered, unsure of how to speak to the monstrosity which waddled towards him. There are other customers. If you just wait your place in line...
There are no other customers than me, Professor Egghead, the creature shrieked as he shoved the innocent bystanders to the floor. I demand flesh and bread. I demand fuel for my body so that I can commit my mind to science. One by one they crashed head first into the floor to the crackling joy of the studio audience. Soon enough the egg-shaped abomination was face to face with Teddy.
You found my boy, cried the voice from the phone. Please tell me my boy's safe.
I will destroy all that is in my path in the name of science, the walking nightmare hollered. Bring me a feast worthy of a philosopher king. With each uncomfortable twitch of Teddy's face, the audience on screen exploded into another fit of hysterical laughter. I tried to turn down the sound of the television so that I could hear the grieving man on the phone, but it was to no avail. With every press of the remote, the Eggman shouted louder. With every decreased decibel, the studio audience became wilder. Leaving a desperate Teddy flickering on the screen, I escaped to the balcony.
Please do not joke about this, he whimpered into the phone. My heart cannot handle cruelty right now.
I took a deep breath, lit up a cigarette, and explained myself. I told him about the tape, about Professor Egghead, about Teddy. All I got in response was silence. I tried to imagine how I would respond if I was on the other side of the phone, how I'd make sense of it all, but I couldn't. I waited for the man's response with echoes of canned applause playing in the back of my mind.
This is not a joke,
Teddy's father finally asked.
No, I said. It all sounds crazy, but...
A wave of dizziness washed through me. My cigarette plummeted down to the streets below. Suddenly the overcast city in front of me was impossibly bright, as if someone had turned on 1,000 fluorescent bulbs across the sky. The applause, the canned applause that I thought was a simple memory in the back of my skull, had grown to a tangible volume. My legs felt weak. Fearing the balcony railing, I stumbled back into my apartment. I am Professor Egghead, boomed the television. I have arrived to exchange monetary tokens for goods. I must stock my domicile quickly so that I can commit the rest of my time on this planet to science. The audience clapped and laughed, but suddenly they went silent. The only thing that I could hear was a gentle, repetitive beep. The beep of a supermarket checkout aisle. What is this? He screamed. In the name of science, what is this? Past the buzzing lights in front of my eyes, I could see a spot of dark. I blindly crawled towards it, desperately hoping to regain my sight. Where is he? Professor Egghead demanded. How am I meant to make a purchase when the sales clerk is missing? As I felt my way towards the one part of my universe that wasn't drenched in eye-burning light, a tower of cassettes collapsed against my back. I was back in Teddy's room, and I was looking up at the screen. The television was calming to my eyes, but it stirred fear in my heart. I was looking at the fluorescent-lit checkout line of a supermarket. A trail of blood and bodies led up to an unattended register. A defiant Professor Egghead gripped his shopping cart and stared into the camera with dead eyes. I have taken temporary leave from the world of science to purchase goods, and this is how I am rewarded. Where is the shop assistant? I demand the shop assistant, he screamed. The studio audience was in complete silence. All that could be heard was the gentle beep of a far-off checkout machine and the professor's labored breathing. Where is he? I demand answers. Where is he? Spit was flying from his mouth onto the camera. In a show of rage, he started jabbing his shopping cart in the direction of the audience. "I am world-renowned scientist Professor Egghead. I do not have time for this." He wheeled his cart back and forth, foaming at the mouth as if he were a rabid dog. But something behind the camera caught his exhausted eye. "Oh," he said, his voice losing all its fury. "There you are." His sudden change of tone made me flinch away from the screen, but his dull eyes followed me. "Professor Egghead can see you," he said, his eyes still dead tired but his mouth forming into a thin-lipped smile. "Come back to where you belong. Let me pay for my goods so I can return to my work in the field of science." The clapping resumed again. It was quiet at first, but as the abhorrent grin on the television grew, the applause became louder and louder. Whatever was happening, the audience loved it. "Come on back to Professor Egghead," he said, flashing a smile of thin, yellow teeth. "I demand attention." The light around me reverberated with growing strength. The clapping and cheering and whistling was so loud it felt as if my eyes were about to pop out of my skull. "I demand attention," the Eggman screamed, the rage returning to his voice. "I demand it! I demand it! I demand—" The screen went dark, and so did the blinding light. I was back in Teddy's room, alone and drenched in sweat. For a moment I just lay on the floor, staring up at the cracks in the ceiling, trying to find a loose thread of sanity in an insane world. Before I could even begin to process the madness, I had witnessed my phone starting to ring. It was Teddy's father. He begged me to turn the tape back on, to rewind and find the image of his lost son, to bring some semblance of hope back into his life. But I couldn't. I refused to be in the same room as that tape, let alone watch it again. Whatever was on that cassette was cruel and dangerous. I didn't want to end up like Teddy. Well, he offered money. He wept. He got angry. But nothing that he could do or say would make me go back to that hellscape. I offered to mail the tape to him, but the idea of entrusting the footage to the postal service drove the man furious. After 2 hours on the phone, Teddy's father informed me that he would be flying to Prague and retrieving the VHS tape himself. I didn't argue with the man. The thought of not being alone with the confounding reality of Professor Egghead even eased my mind somewhat. With a last-minute flight, Teddy's father would be back in Prague in less than 2 days. I figured I could hold on that long. For a moment, I was calm. But that moment didn't last long. As I went to sleep that night, I couldn't escape the vision of those dull eyes and that angry mouth. Even as I write this, with the morning sun quietly peeking into my room, the visage of the egg-shaped man still haunts me. Yet it's not the mere idea of Professor Egghead that's stealing sleep from me right now. No, there's something much worse that's keeping me awake. Throughout the night, as I found myself leaving behind my worries and nodding off to sleep, I started to hear things. I hear beeps. Whenever I'm about to fall asleep, I hear the gentle beeps of a checkout machine, and beneath those beeps I hear steadily growing applause. I fear that if I fall asleep, even for a second, I'll be transported into the same demented reality where the egg-shaped man makes his demands. I fear that I'll disappear just like Teddy. Well, I don't know how long I can stay awake. I don't know how to make this stop. All I know is that I don't want to go back there. I don't want to witness another one of Professor Egghead's adventures. If you ever watch a VHS tape titled Professor Egghead's Adventures, do not go to sleep. She knocks just as I finish my 6th coffee of the morning. I hug her tighter than anyone I've ever hugged in my life. For a moment, with her body pressed against mine, I feel sane. I almost convinced myself that everything that has happened over the past 24 hours was just one long fever dream. Yet as she kisses me and I close my eyes, an overwhelming tiredness washes through my skull, and beneath that wave of exhaustion I hear something. I hear a distinct beep. "Oh, you taste like an ashtray," she says, with the world's slightest grin. "You look like shit." "I haven't slept since Friday morning," I tell her. "Why?" she asks. I search for words. I search for some sort of an explanation, but the facts of my situation struggle to stick together in my sleep-deprived brain. "Want a coffee?" I ask. "Sure," she says, and then lies down on my couch. She walks past me. The smell of her conditioner reminds me of that first night. I remember how she teased me for being an American, how she busted my balls about being another foreigner teaching English in Prague, how her hair smelled as she fell asleep in my arms. I remember how soft her bed was. I brew her a small cup of coffee. As the machine grinds away at the beans, I can't help but to watch her tap away at her phone. There's nothing more that I want to do than lie down next to her and rest my head on her breasts. The land of sleep beckons me from her bosom. But I resist. I know I have to resist. I make myself 4 espressos in a single mug. When I sit down next to her, she throws her long legs on my lap and starts cheerily chirping away about something. Well, her accent never gave me any trouble over the past couple of months, but the tension behind my eyeballs makes it impossible to understand a word she's saying. "Hey," she nudges me with her foot. "You okay there, big guy?" I try to reply, but it feels like a lethargic worm has replaced my tongue. I take a long, scalding gulp of my coffee. My tongue still feels foreign, but the burning pain that travels down my throat gives me some semblance of control over my words. Remember Teddy?" I ask her. "Yeah," she says. "Your missing skeleton boy roommate, right?" I almost tell her not to call him that, but I don't. Petra's tendency for cruelty is the last thing on my mind right now. "Yeah," I say. "Well, his parents held a memorial service back in Baltimore yesterday. No one's searching for him anymore." "Oh," she says, her fiery eyes growing dim with empathy. "Sorry, I didn't mean to call him Skeleton Boy. How you doing?" The door to Teddy's room is still open. Past the VHS tapes on the floor, I see his bulky television. "I found him," I say. "What?" she asks, sitting up. "His dad invited me to speak at the service. He even offered to pay for the airfare, but I don't know, it just didn't feel right. I barely knew Teddy. I mean, we lived together and the kid was chill, but the only thing I really knew about him was that he collected VHS tapes. It didn't feel right to speak in front of his grieving family. But I figured that, I don't know, if the guy's gone, if the guy's dead, I should at least pay a little bit of respect to his memory. Never asked about the collection because I didn't care, but I figured he'd like it if I made an effort. So I watched one of his tapes." "That's sweet," she says, leaning over and wrapping her arms around me. "That's really sweet." Those grime-filled eyes, that filthy hair, the screaming. Sweet is the last descriptor that I would use for what I found inside of Teddy's VCR. Petra's hug eases those images out of my mind, but her embrace is far too comforting. It's far too soft. I feel my eyes closing. I hear that infernal beep echo through the core of my being. I shrug her off. "I wanted to watch like Random Friends episode or something," I tell her, but when I turned on the TV, there was already a tape inside of it. Professor Egghead's Adventures. "Never heard of it," she says. Petra leans back on the couch and gives up on the embrace, yet she continues to caress me with her foot. On any other day, I'd welcome her advances, but I know I have to save my energy. I know I have to stay awake if I'm to stay away from him. It's not a show," I say. "The tape that I found inside of Teddy's VCR is not a sitcom like the rest of his collection. It's..." I search for words. The only thing that comes to mind is the word abomination. But I doubt she knows that word. I doubt she'd understand. "It's, really bad," I finally say. I watch the tape and there's this man, or creature, monster. I don't know what to call him. He's a man shaped like an egg with horrible, horrible eyes. Professor Egghead. He calls himself Professor Egghead, and he just screams. He screams about science. He screams about demanding attention. He screams and he hurts people. And that's why you haven't slept for a day? Because you're scared of this Professor Egghead that you saw on the television. With every word that leaves her lips, I can feel her pulling away from me. She came here because she thought I was having a bad day and needed company. But now she thinks I'm fundamentally broken. I don't blame her. The visage of Professor Egghead has shattered my life. He's not just on the television, I say, trying to explain my terror. I mean, yeah, he's on the television, but he exists somewhere else. Professor Egghead exists somewhere beyond the scope of... Look, I found Teddy. Professor Egghead trapped Teddy in the television, and now Professor Egghead is trying to trap me. Petra raises one perfect eyebrow in confusion. I swear I'm not lying. On the tape, Professor Egghead went to a fast food restaurant, and Teddy was behind the register. I swear to God it was him. That's why no one could find Teddy when he went missing. It's because he somehow got trapped inside of the television. Somehow Professor Egghead got to him, and now he's after me. There's this scene. At the end of the tape, there's a scene where Professor Egghead goes shopping, and there's no one behind the cash register. He wants me there. He looked at me from the screen and demanded that I get behind the cash register and serve him. He wants to trap me inside of the television just like he trapped Teddy. Well, I hoped that telling her would lessen the burden on my tired shoulders, but it doesn't. Petra stares at me like I'd just escaped from a mental institution. For a moment, I feel like she'll just get up and leave, like she'll abandon me with the horrible reality I've been thrust into. But then she smiles. Any drugs in the house? I swear to God I'm not on drugs. It's all real. Please, Petra, I need you to believe me. You Americans with your swears to gods, she says. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if there's any drugs in your house. Some weed on my desk, I think. Good boy, she says as she gets up and strolls over to my room. I watch her as she leaves, hoping that some primal part of my brain will find distraction in her figure. But I don't. The only body I can think of is the misshapen mass of Professor Egghead. Come here, Petra yells from the bedroom. And by the time I drag myself over, the pipe is already back on my bedstand, and thin wisps of smoke hang around Petra's head. Sprawled out on my soft bed, the morning light caresses her legs. She nudges the side of the mattress with her foot, calling me to sit. My drained body obliges. So there's a man made of eggs in the television who kidnapped your old roommate, and now he's going to kidnap you, she says. Do I understand correctly? No, he's not actually made of eggs. He's like one big egg with a human face and a lab coat. I try to explain, but her face leaves little room for nuance. Yeah, I say, that's pretty much it. And you can't go to sleep. Why? Well, the word sleep sounds like an invitation from her lips. It echoes through my head. Sleep, sleep, sleep is all I need. My eyes feel heavy, and for a moment they close. But then... beep. If I go to sleep, he'll get me. When he's in the supermarket, when I watch the television, I can't explain it, Petra. It's like he reached out for me. It's like I was there. I could feel him looking at me. I could see the fluorescent lighting of the supermarket. I could hear the beeping of the checkout machines. I turned off the television and got away, but now, whenever I go to sleep, I can feel him reaching out. When I close my eyes, I can hear the beeping of the checkout machines. Her face wavers between laughter and concern, but finally she just shakes her head and smiles. So, what? What, are you just never going to sleep again? The thought had crossed my mind before. The thought of it all eventually ending, of me falling asleep. I don't allow myself to go down that hopeless rabbit hole again. I called Teddy's father as soon as I saw his son on the television. He's flying over to check out the tape. I hope that if he watches it, that somehow this will all end. I hope that this can all end. Petra stares at me in disbelief. You called your missing roommate's father on the day of his son's memorial. Are you sick? Petra, I swear this is all real. I know it sounds crazy. I know I sound crazy, but please, I need you to believe me. Wordlessly, she reaches for the pipe again. You're lucky you're cute, she says. When's Teddy's father coming? Tomorrow evening. Those words burn on my tongue. I know I can't last that long, but I also know it's my only hope. I just want you to stay with me until tomorrow evening, and then maybe this will all end. You are lucky you're cute, she repeats, less enthused than before. Her delicate fingers brush against my arm. On any other occasion I would welcome them, but as she caresses me, I shudder and pull away. Even though her fingers are long and sleek, they still remind me of Professor Egghead's stubby limbs. So, how are you going to stay awake? Coffee and energy drinks, I say. The sink in the bathroom is also filled up with ice water in case of emergency. Well, how about some physical exercise? She asks, pulling me closer. Petra, we shouldn't, I reply. Oh, come on. You made me come all the way across the city just so you can tell me some man made of eggs is going to capture you if you fall asleep. What am I getting out of this? Do you not believe me? What do you think? I can show you the tape. It's still in Teddy's VCR. If you just... I don't want to see the tape. I came here to see you. If you want me to stay here until Teddy's father arrives, I can. Maybe I'll even tell you a nice bedtime story when everything is over. Just let me wake you up a bit. His grubby little hands. That's all I can think about as she touches me. Her piercing eyes are filled with sex, but they're irrelevant. I know that somewhere out there, attached to a pale and misshapen body, there are two bloodshot eyeballs covered in grimy crust, watching me, waiting for me to slip. Yet I know that I cannot face the egg-shaped abomination alone. I know I need her. Promise you'll stay, I ask. Scout's honor, Petra replies as she pulls me towards her. She kisses me and I lack the strength to resist. We're in bed alone, but the act might as well be a threesome. Under my hands, her skin feels like rough eggshell. Beneath each moan she lets out, I fear his frantic shouts about science. There are moments when I forget Petra is even in the room. All I know is that his sleepless eyes are watching me. Beep. I try to resist it, but I can't. Beep. A blinding light of fluorescent light bulbs drowns out her naked body. Beep. I hear the sounds of checkout machines. Beep. There's a meek-looking balding man standing by my register. His shopping cart contains a fancy-looking bottle of red wine, a box of Swiss chocolates, a 12-pack of Durex Extra Safe condoms, and a child-sized package of Haribo gummy bears. He refuses to look me in the eyes. No, I whisper, desperately hoping to be elsewhere. Wake up, goddammit. Behind me, a sad-looking woman scans a can of beans. Beep. She wears the same dark blue supermarket uniform as me. Beep. She doesn't scan any new items. She just keeps on scanning the same can over and over. Beep. The sad elderly man on the other side of the checkout counter doesn't seem to mind. He knows there isn't much time left. Beep. Somewhere from beyond the dog food aisles, I hear the faint beginning of applause. He's coming. Professor Egghead is coming. Escape. My mind immediately turns to thoughts of escape, of getting away from the walking fever dream that's on an unavoidable path towards my checkout register. Yet as I look past my workstation, to where an exit from the supermarket would conceivably be, all I see is the faint dim of television static. The world I stand in is not my own. The world I stand in is his, and he draws the boundaries. The applause grows in volume. The invisible audience is excited to see their favorite character. How do I get out of here? I ask the balding man. He doesn't acknowledge me. Instead, he stares into the television static beyond, waiting for the inevitable. With shaking hands, I grab his shirt. Please, there has to be a way out. His eyes stay glued to the confounding universe of madness in front of him, but his lips part slightly. Don't fight it, he whispers. He makes it worse if you fight it. Someone has to know, I yell at the procession of carts behind the man. The applause grows wild. A shopping cart squeaks towards the back of the line. The moment of reckoning is at hand. Please, someone, help me get away from him. I am Professor Egghead, he screams from behind the line of terrified shoppers. I have arrived to exchange monetary tokens for goods. I must stock my domicile quickly so I can commit the rest of my time on this planet to science. I don't see his misshapen body past the other shoppers, but I can see his cart. It's filled up with dog food and toilet paper. I have arrived to trade goods. I have taken a break from my work in the field of science to prolong my survival in this modern society, he raves, ramming his cart into the middle-aged couple in front of him. But I have no time for waiting. I must make my purchase now so I can work on my inventions. The studio audience explodes into laughter as a man is visibly injured by Professor Egghead's overfilled cart. Yet as the monstrosity advances in the queue, the laughter stops. The shoppers are no longer staring into the wall of static. They're looking at me. I'm meant to say something. Please, I plead with them. Help me. I don't belong here. Please. I have come here expecting speedy service. I have come here expecting the respect and adoration that Professor Egghead deserves. But instead I am stuck behind the masses. Instead I am treated like a rabid dog awaiting his execution. The Professor's insane ramblings get a couple of chuckles out of the studio audience, but the silence soon returns. Everyone is staring at me. Tell him he has to wait his turn, the balding man mumbles with fear in his voice. Tell him he has to wait his turn, and this will all end much quicker. Terrified and with no other direction in life, I follow the balding man's instructions. You have to wait your turn, Professor Egghead, I say. What? The cruel voice rages from the back of the line. I will do no such thing. I am a man of science, not a man of waiting. The audience explodes into another burst of applause as the abhorrent creature waddles out from behind his shopping cart. His deformed, egg-shaped body is barely covered by his greasy lab coat. Filthy strands of jet-black hair jut out of his pointed scalp like the claws of a demon. He is a nightmare personified. With spine-chilling speed, his stout hands grab the dress of the woman in front of him. In one swift motion, he sends her clattering to the ground. A loud crack escapes from her body as it meets the floor. The studio audience applauds and laughs and cheers at the violence. Energized by the invisible spectators, Professor Egghead moves to the next shopper and drives them to the ground as well. In a series of brutal assaults, Professor Egghead attacks each and every person in his way. None of them get back up. Just follow the script, the balding man says. Follow the script and don't make him angry. If he gets angry, he'll... The man's sentence is finished by a crack as his skull meets the floor. Red and tired and diseased, Professor Egghead's drooping eyes stare into my soul. For a moment he just looks at me, his sharp-toothed mouth smiling at the discomfort he's brewing in my soul. But then, with a burst of pep in his step, he travels to the back of the line. As he moves past the unmoving bodies of the innocent shoppers, he overturns their carts to clear the way for his own groceries. The corpses don't bother him. As he moves back towards me, he lets his shopping cart crush everything beneath his path. A trail of mangled bodies and blood lies in his wake. Spit festers in the corners of his angry mouth. With my powerful brain, I've already calculated the monetary worth of my purchase, Professor Egghead screams. There is no need for you to waste my time with your maddening barcodes. He reaches into the pocket of his lab coat and produces 3 lumpy pieces of stone. Not being able to reach my register, the egg-shaped man is forced into labored hops. After 3 unsuccessful attempts to put the stones on the counter, he finally succeeds. The invisible audience finds this deserving of thunderous applause. These are the precious minerals that I have collected from beneath the ground. I trust that you will find them of equal value to the goods that I have purchased, he yells up at me. I keep my eyes locked on the dark stone, hoping that Professor Egghead will leave, hoping that I'll wake up back in my room next to Petra. But he doesn't leave. He keeps on staring at me, waiting. Tell him you only accept cash or credit, a human voice pleads from behind the counter. The boarding man's head is trapped beneath one of the wheels of the overfilled cart. Blood drips from his mouth, yet his pained eyes still manage to meet mine. Please, just tell him what he wants to hear. No, I yell. No, this is all wrong. I don't belong here. The tape wasn't mine. I wasn't meant to watch it. I want to go back. A moment of silence drags into a tense eternity, but eventually someone in the invisible audience boos. They're joined with a legion of hisses and jeers, as if the anger of the crowd was the source of some unspeakable power. Professor Egghead jumps. In one instantaneous show of agility, the grotesque scientist leaps on top of the checkout counter. I am Professor Egghead, master of the mind, dominator of the sciences, he bellows. You will submit. With the strength of a sucker punch, the professor rockets himself into my abdomen. In an instant, I'm knocked to the ground, struggling to breathe. I try to bat the heavy egg creature away, but his plump fingers seize my arm. I am Professor Egghead, he screams, as his powerful hands start to crush my arm. I demand your obedience. The pain's unbearable. The pain is incomprehensible. The pain causes all my pleas for freedom to turn into throat-burning screams. I feel my bones starting to shatter beneath his grasp. I demand it. I demand it. I demand... A thud and a crack. A blunt force sends a bolt of pain through my face. Blood starts to pour out of my nose. I try to lift myself up, but my right arm refuses to move. I bleed on the floor. I bleed on the floor of my bedroom. Bad dream? Petra asks, leaning over the side of my bed. Reality comes crashing down on me harder than the heavy egg that just attacked me. I'm beyond happy that I've escaped the fat-fingered clutches of the professor. I'm overjoyed to be safe and alive in a world that I can make sense of. But that joy is overtaken by anger. My eyes burn with sleep deprivation and rage as I look up at the naked woman leaning over my bed. You let me fall asleep. You passed out. And before you threw yourself off the bed, you looked pretty peaceful. I thought that maybe you just needed some rest. You were acting crazy. Bitch! Excuse me? You let me fall asleep. I told you about him. I told you that he'd get me if I fell asleep. You were meant to help me stay awake. What did you call me? Look what he did to me. The part of my arm that Professor Egghead had gripped burns with pain, but the skin is only slightly reddened. I clamber up to my feet to get closer to her, to show her what the Eggman had done to me, to show what she could have stopped. But I don't get that far. Beep. As soon as I'm standing, a new wave of exhaustion washes through me with dizzying force. Beep. Blood drips from my nose. With each drop, I feel weaker. Beep. I summon all of my strength and dash to the bathroom. The ice bath in my sink shocks me awake. I stare at the clogged-up drain. The frigid water feels like chlorine against my eyes. Everything hurts and everything is chaos. I know I can't resist the pull of sleep forever. I know I'm doomed. Yet as my bleeding nose turns the white of the porcelain pink, a memory emerges. A memory that provides a solution. For a split second, I'm not in some dingy bathroom in Prague. I'm back at the bay. It's 2012, and I'm sitting at home watching AMC with my dad. The television gives us an interesting bit of information about the Czech Republic. I'm leaving. I barely hear her past the water. What? I thought you were going to stay. Petra, I need your help. I'm leaving, she says, standing in the hallway. She already has her underwear on. A t-shirt dangles from her hand, and cold anger lingers in her eyes. Is it because I called you a bitch? Her face responds adequately. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. Look, I'm just really stressed. I know this whole Professor Egghead thing sounds crazy, but I'm sorry for calling you a bitch. I won't do it again. The t-shirt continues to dangle from her hand. She doesn't put it on. Look, I'm sorry I dragged you into this, Petra. I really am. I should have told you before I invited you over. No one wants to spend their Saturday with a crazy guy talking about a man made of eggs. I promise I'll make this up to you. I just need your help on one thing. She probes me with her eyes, not letting a single hint of emotion show on her face. How will you make this up to me? She finally asks. However you want. What do you want me to do, Petra? It depends. What do you need help with? I need to find some meth. Meth? Meth. Yes, meth. Back home we had this show called Breaking Bad where a science teacher starts cooking really strong methamphetamines. Him and his friends start exporting the drugs to the Czech Republic because you guys are the biggest consumers of the stuff in the world. Petra doesn't answer. She pulls on her t-shirt and stomps off to my bedroom. I follow her, pleading, leaving a trail of bloodied water on the linoleum. Oh, come on. You have to know someone, right? There has to be some truth to the show, right? Wordlessly, she pulls on a single sock. But as she reaches for the second one, her scowl breaks into angry words. You've lived here for what? A year? You've lived here for a year and you still base your understanding of my culture on some bullshit Hollywood show. I sit down on the bed next to her. The gentle fluff of the covers makes me feel like I'm sitting on a cloud. She calls to me from the mattress. Beep. Petra, please. And not that it's a matter of national pride, but we are not just the biggest consumers of methamphetamines. We are also the biggest producers and exporters of the stuff. To imply that you would make sense to export drugs across the Pacific is just more bullshit American exceptionalism. With a single sock on her foot, she yells at me. At moments, I'm unsure if she's yelling at me because of who I am as a person, or if she's yelling at me because I'm American. It doesn't make a difference. When she finishes her rant, Petra throws on the rest of her clothes and marches out of my door. I'm left alone, sleep-deprived and methless. The red bruise on my arm turns black. After another quadruple shot of espresso, I pick up my phone and call anyone and everyone in my contacts list who could possibly have access to drugs. I'm met with laughter and confusion every time. When I push for information, I'm met with the dial tone. In between the frantic phone calls, I shove my head in the cold water in the sink with the hopes of prolonging my consciousness. As the rejections mount, the ice starts to melt. By the time I have no one to call, all I'm left with is a sink full of pink, lukewarm water. For a moment I consider restocking the ice, but the creeping darkness outside whispers promises of rest. I know that I can't last another 24 hours in my apartment without going to sleep. Putting on my coat, I walk out into the cold November night. The crisp fall air steadies me somewhat as I leave my house, but the flash of alertness doesn't last long. Soon enough, I'm aimlessly walking through the city of Prague, unsure of how I'll resist the pull of the nightmarish egg creature that haunts me. Even though architecture of the city is of rough Gothic stone, I can't help but to find it soft. The world's soft. Every bench, every tram stop, every medieval divot in the ancient structures calls to me and invites me to lie down and rest. I stagger across the cobblestone, trying to remind myself of what will happen if I dare to dream. Beep. Hey, boss, are you looking for girls? I found myself standing on the brightly lit Wenceslas Square. The statue of the Czech patron saint towers over the end of the boulevard, promising protection from all the forces that would dare harm the country. Grand structures of Parisian architecture spread out in front of him, promising a culture that will never be forgotten. Next to me stands a strip club promoter, wearing an oversized top hat and a glimmering coat of fake gold. "Hottest girls in all of Prague. Free entry," he says, smiling a salesman's grin. "No, thank you," I reply, remembering my previous attempt to distract myself from the demented reality of Professor Egghead with the female form. "Ah, American. You're here to party, yes? I can show you the wildest bars, best beer, best girls, and best fun." "I live here," I reply. This completely changes his demeanor. "Ah, fuck off then," he says, realizing he can't sell me on any of the tourist traps. "Go back home to your cheeseburgers." Not wanting to break my nose a second time, I start to walk away. But then I stop. I look at the man. He no longer looks like the product of an affair between a magician and a carpet. For a moment, in the flickering of the electric lamplights, he looks like my only hope. "Hey," I say, "do you know where I can find some meth?" I have resorted to extreme measures to escape Professor Egghead. First, I don't feel it. At first, I'm just a bruised-up corpse wavering in and out of consciousness. But then, a jolt, a serrated bolt of lightning flashes from the core of my being out to my extremities. My fingertips feel electric. I'm wide awake. I'm not scared anymore. I am freaking wired. A dirty energy roars through my body. I feel 1,000 filthy suns burn in my chest. The rush of power is so overwhelming, so ecstatic, that I can't help but to howl. Like a freaking wolf, I call out to a moon that I know shines for me somewhere beyond the city. My nose might be broken, and the feeling in my right arm might be gone, but I am a raging, walking god. "Screw you, Professor Egghead," I scream, clutching the bathroom mirror. "You can't get to me when I'm awake. You can't do shit. I'm the one in charge now." There's a knock on the door. McDonald's security. They say they're going to call the cops. I grab the bag and bolt out the door. Well, they're not chasing me, but I don't stop running. I sprint through the old town of Prague and let the history of the city envelop me. The place is like 1,000 years old. Centuries and centuries of cobblestone and churches and bullets and blood. And I'm on top of it all. I am the apex predator. My heart beats like it's about to jump out of my chest, and my entire being vibrates with a newfound will to live. It takes me a good minute to realize my phone's ringing. It's Teddy's father. "Hi, just calling to let you know I'm on my way to the airport. Couldn't find any direct flights on such short notice, but with a couple of layovers, I should be landing around 8 p.m. tomorrow local time." "Cool," I say, still running. "No need to be in the house when I arrive. I still have Teddy's keys." "That's great." I try to focus on the conversation, but I can't. The lights of the city, the fresh air, the power boiling in my veins, it's just all so infinitely more interesting. For a moment he's silent, but then Teddy's father lets out a labored sigh. "Oh, I'm also calling to apologize for yelling at you. I didn't mean to get angry, it's just that I love my son. When his mother passed, it was a difficult time for both of us. Teddy went off to his own little world with his collections, and I figured that, well, if that's what he needed to do, I thought supporting Teddy during his move to Prague would help bring back my son, but I don't understand this business with the tape. I hope I'll understand tomorrow. Look, I just wanted to apologize for yelling at you, and I also wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For being Teddy's friend. I mean, he spoke very highly of you." Another burst of euphoria flows through my chest. Of course Teddy spoke highly of me. I'm a really cool guy. Just as I'm about to say something to that effect to Teddy's father, however, I accidentally hang up the phone. The man doesn't call back. Thoughts of the sad man disappear beneath the sheer enjoyment of my drug-fueled sprint. I stop at the clock tower, not because I'm out of breath. I mean, I could run 10 miles if I wanted to, but because my nose starts bleeding again. I fish out some loose tissues from my jacket and contain the damage. Flashes of light. A group of tourists takes pictures of me. I'm more interested in the clock tower show. They'll all be telling their families about the strange, energetic man covered in blood they saw in Prague's old town. I pose for them, because why not? You only live once. I don't forget about him. I know that somewhere in the near future I will come face to face with those rotting eyes again. But the thought doesn't bother me. I just feel so freaking good. An hour ago, I was terrified of falling asleep before sunrise. Now I know that with enough willpower, I could outlast the nightmare for 100 nights. The bell of the tower rings 8 times. 8 p.m. That's when Teddy's father arrives tomorrow. That's when that horrible VHS tape will be out of my life. All I need to do is to keep myself occupied for the next 24 hours. With the chemical vitality coursing through my bloodstream, I don't have to cower in fear. I can prosper. A brave Chinese lady walks out of the crowd of tourists and poses in front of me. She's pointing at me, her face frozen in an exaggerated giggle for her husband's camera. I'm sure her family back home will get a kick out of the picture, but before her husband has a chance to snap the moment into eternity, I'm gone. I sprint to the subway station. I feel more energized than I have ever felt in my life. I can't waste this boon of inspiration. I know what I have to do. The question of writing a book about my life was less of an if and more of a when question. As soon as I moved to Prague, I knew that I had a story worth committing to paper. Barely anyone who I went to high school with moved outside of California. They weren't brave enough to seize life by its horns. No, they stayed home and started working dead-end jobs and having ugly children. They let the comfort zone consume them. I didn't. I traveled far from home and left my comfort zone in the dust. As soon as I moved to that bright city of Gothic stone, I knew that my life was going to get captured in a book. The nose full of meth just gave me the extra push I needed. As soon as I enter the subway, paragraphs worth of words about the unfriendliness of the locals start to rapid fire in my mind. The carriage is full of grumpy Czechs who all look like someone spit in their food. All those tired faces, the rumbling of the train, it inspires me, but it also bores me. Not wanting to let my burst of vitality be sucked away by the grey surroundings, I pop in my headphones. I hope the drums of the Warriors of Perun will keep me energized. They do. They even get me moving. At first, it's just a tap of the foot. As I take in the steady flow of music in my ears, I can't help but tap along to the beat. But as the music grows, as the rhythm of the drums turns savage, my feet give up on restraint. I start stomping along to the rapid-fire blasts buzzing in my ears. And soon enough, I'm dancing. My nose starts bleeding again. The other commuters step back in disgust, but that just gives me more space to dance. My arms and legs move independent of conscious thought. My body sings a primal song to the breakneck tempo of life. I stand in a steadily thickening pool of my own blood, but I've never felt more alive. The music beckons me towards a grimy rapture. Close my eyes and follow it. Applause. Just as we pass the Smyshovsky-Nadražsy station, I hear applause. For a moment I try to deny it. For a moment I try to keep my eyes closed and focus in on the powerful music in my ears. But I can't. I know he's watching me. I know Professor Egghead is nearby. The other passengers of the subway have cleared way to make room for my blood-soaked dance. But when I open my eyes, I see him sitting in front of me. His body is still an egg-shaped abomination, only vaguely resembling a human. His stubby legs hang from the train seat like malformed baby limbs. But Professor Egghead's eyes are different. They're wide open and shaking. Amphetamines were first synthesized in 1887 by Romanian chemist Lazar Edeleanu. The egg creature rasps breathlessly, as if he was delivering a lecture in front of a firing squad. Yet it wasn't until the Second World War that they attained common usage. Nearly all branches of the Wehrmacht armed forces utilized the benefits of the miracle drug. Without amphetamines, the Blitzkrieg would be impossible. I shut my eyes and turned up the music to a deafening volume. With my soul wavering between spine-crackling ecstasy and soul-shattering fear, I dance. I stomp and I spin and I jump, hoping to drown out the professor's demented lecture. Yet no matter how hard I try to ignore his high-pitched torrent of useless information, I know he's there. I know those quivering yellow eyes are watching me. When the subway arrives at my station, I burst out the door. For a blessed moment, I'm alone. Sprinting through the dark streets, the night air starts to wash out the sweat and panic from my system, but the moment of energized tranquility doesn't last long. Behind me I hear the brisk staccato of the professor's shoes. He's moving faster than an egg-shaped man ever should. Methamphetamine stimulates dopamine production in the user's brain beyond the scope of any other activity or substance. The nightmare screeches as he runs behind me. Sexual intercourse increases the dopamine units to 200. Cocaine and heroin increase the dopamine units to 400. Methamphetamine increases the brain's dopamine production to 1,500 units. On a chemical scale, there's nothing like the pleasure that's coursing through your veins right now. My hands are so numb I have trouble finding my keys. The drugs, the fear, the pain, a chaotic symphony of a filthy life buzzes in my veins, threatening to send me clattering down to the ground. Yet the toxic fire burning in my chest steadies me. When I finally get the door of the apartment complex opened, I jump in and slam it shut. The burst of euphoria from the usage of methamphetamines, however, has its price, the professor says from behind the glass entrance to the complex. As I run to the elevator, I pray that the locked door will keep him away from me, and as I shake in the elevator, I even start to believe it. Yet by the time I reach my unit, he's standing in the hallway, waiting for me. What goes up must come down, he says. That is science. I slam the door behind me. I lock it, I chain it, but it doesn't matter. When I turn around, the professor is on my couch, lying on his side, staring at me with his quivering eyeballs. The side effects of methamphetamine usage were so severe that within a year of the war effort, the Nazi High Command restricted the stimulants for only the most dire of cases. The withdrawal effects left the soldiers. I put the earphones back in and headed for my computer. The Egghead continues detailing the dangers of methamphetamine withdrawal from my couch, but I don't listen to him. I don't care about such suicidal migraines or psychosis. I can't afford to care about those things. No, I only care about staying awake until Teddy's father arrives. I open up Microsoft Word and stare at a white page. At first, all I can think about is the Egghead. At first, all I can think about are the prophecies of horrible withdrawal symptoms that he whispers about. But the dirty suns that burn in my chest flare up. A new, overwhelming surge of energy courses through my body. I start typing. The fingers on my right hand make mistakes, but I ignore their folly. Even though they shake and misjudge their movements, they're attached to a mind burning with inspiration. Typos can be corrected later. The magical flow of creativity cannot be postponed. As I weave gold on the page, time dissolves into nothingness. I become the center of the universe. Every step that I ever took back home was leading me to Prague. Everything I ever did in the States pointed me towards the bohemian paradise where I could become the truest version of myself. From my depths, an artistic soul demands to be let out. My inner bohemian takes control. Yet as I write about my zany adventures in the heart of Europe, something else emerges from my depths. A headache. It starts off light, as a simple itch behind my eyes, but soon enough it grows to a palpable strength. My nose starts to twitch. The withdrawal symptoms from methamphetamine usage are so severe that most users will binge the drug just to avoid the come-down phase. The egg-shaped abomination's voice booms past my music. But no one can run forever. What comes up must come down. That is science. The morning sun illuminates him as if he were a deity. His eyes shine like two sickly moons. For a moment I believe him. For a couple of beats of my tiring heart, I despair over the future that awaits me. But then, I do more meth. The rush is just as instant as before, but I feel no need to vocalize it this time. I just go back to the keyboard and continue churning out my life story. As the hours fly by, the room becomes far too bright. I shut the windows. I dim the screen. I let my fingers work in the dark. Whenever the headache starts to crawl back through my skull, I reach for the magic powder. But the pain is relentless and my supplies are limited. By the time I start writing about Petra, all I have left is an empty plastic baggie. The headache persists. It squeezes at any capacity my mind has for clear thoughts. The base of my skull feels like it's on fire. I'm in agony, and I feel empty. I feel so empty. "You will come back to Professor Egghead," he says. "Soon enough you'll be back in the supermarket. Soon enough you'll be making the audience laugh. Soon enough you'll serve me." Even in the dark room I can see his eyes. They shine with an indescribable madness. They shake with unbridled excitement. Professor Egghead always gets what he wants. "No," I yell, partly for him, but mainly to calm the fire that's starting up in the pit of my stomach. "I can do this. I can outlast you. When Teddy's father gets here, you'll be his problem." "Professor Egghead always gets what he demands," he simply repeats. I make myself another quadruple espresso and turn on all the lights in the apartment. The sudden flash of brightness hurts my eyes and the coffee burns my tired tongue, but the real pain comes when I turn on the screen of my laptop. It's all gibberish. 47 single-space Microsoft Word pages of random letters and numbers. The migraine, the broken nose, the soreness in my arm. It all hurts, but it's the realization that I'm a moron that's the true agony. My one saving grace, the one thing that stops me from just lying down and traveling to that horrid dimension of television static, is the clock in the right-hand side of the screen. 8:05 p.m. Teddy's father's already in Prague, and he's on his way to rid me of my egg-shaped burden. Briefly, the thought of rescue eases my mind, but a wave of exhaustion and pain takes precedence almost immediately. Any shred of confidence I've ever held in my life feels misplaced. The minutes pass like a slug crawling through broken glass. Every sound from the hallway is followed by a painful realization that Teddy's father is not behind the door. I find myself leaning back in the couch, dreading the drug-fueled running I indulged in the night before. I struggle with every part of my drained being to stay awake. Professor Egghead sits opposite me, smiling. "Professor Egghead always gets what he demands," he says, and then he yawns. I yawn too. Beep. His eyes stop their frantic shaking. They still look sickly, but there's a calmness behind them. He yawns again. Beep. "Come join Professor Egghead," he says, closing his eyes. "Come and serve me in the name of science." Beep. I rush to the bathroom and retreat to my filthy sink. The water is murky with blood and grime, but I have no choice. Beep. Misjudging my footing, I end up slamming my face on the inside of the sink. The porcelain holds, but a string of warm scarlet blood travels through the pink water. I watch the blood flow from my nose, unsure of how much sleep deprivation I can take. Well, my body answers my question. Beep. Not a lot. I gasp for breath, but immediately lower my face back into the sink. The world outside of the water is far too comfortable, far too warm, far too soft. I turn on the cold water tap and let a stream of frigid water cool the back of my head. It helps, but the exhaustion dragging my body down isn't something that can be fixed. My sleepiness is terminal. Beep. I stand by the sink, taking deep breaths and plunging my head under water as if I was trying to expand my lung capacity, but my body starts to give up. I start to wonder what would happen if I never came up for air. I start to wonder whether Professor Egghead would haunt me past the grave. I decide to test the theory. "What are you doing?" A kind voice screams before my face is hauled out of the murky water. "You're trying to drown yourself. Oh, please don't do that. There's enough pain in the world already." His sad blue eyes stare at me. In one hand, Teddy's father is clutching the side of my bloodied shirt, in the other a pair of keys. "What are you doing?" he asks, his voice shaking. "I've resorted to some extreme measures to escape Professor Egghead," I say. He lets go of my shirt gently, letting me hold myself up against the sink. His eyes drift across the dirty bathroom. I see my reflection in the mirror. It doesn't look good. "Did Teddy also do drugs?" the man asks. "No," I say. "Good," he says. He's about to say something else. He's about to ask me if I'm okay, but the beeping in the back of my skull informs me there's no time for small talk. "VHS is in Teddy's room," I say as I stumble past him. Professor Egghead is still sitting next to the couch, his eyes closed in a peaceful nap. But I don't care. The only thing I care about is getting the beeping that echoes through my soul to stop. I crash down on the couch and try to conserve the little energy I have left. I just watch the tape and get this egg-shaped monstrosity out of my life. The man sets off to Teddy's room without a single word, but he stops at the doorway. Past the mist of my tired eyes, I can see him looking at me. "Thank you again for being Teddy's friend," he says. "Sure," I sigh, too preoccupied with the cocktail of agony and exhaustion flowing through my body. "Just watch the frickin' tape, would you?" I say, trying to hold on to what little strength I have left. He closes the door and soon enough I hear the rumble of a familiar canned applause. I sit up. The beeping in the back of my head disappears. The single piece of good news calms my flailing soul. The beeping is gone. I'm safe. The television next door booms with Professor Egghead's raving. As the studio audience laughs and claps, the sleeping manifestation of the Eggman in front of me smiles. He looks like a baby with some terminal disease that's having a nice dream. Briefly, I feel like I might join him in the land of sleep, like I might finally get some rest. But a shout from the other room jolts me awake. "Teddy, oh Teddy, what have they done to you?" Teddy's father yells. The studio audience goes silent. "Teddy, can you see me? It's me, Dad. I love you." "Dad?" I hear Teddy say. "Dad, where are you? Help, I'm scared." "Oh," the studio audience booms from the television. The sleeping Eggman in front of me is no longer smiling. His disgusting eyes are wide open, and he isn't happy. Without even looking at me, the professor gets up from his sleeping spot and waddles over to Teddy's bedroom. "I am Professor Egghead," he screams, "and these are my adventures." Teddy's father screams something, but he's drowned out by the wild clapping of the audience. For a moment, the whole apartment is filled with echoes of laughter and applause, but then, with an electric pop, everything goes silent. I lie on the couch, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, wondering if it's all over. When I close my eyes, there's no beeping. When I close my eyes, I feel like I'm alone. When I close my eyes, I feel like I can rest without becoming a character in Professor Egghead's adventures. The gates of sleep invite my tired soul to rest, and I am more than willing to enter their soft kingdom. But I don't. Past the exhaustion and pain and methamphetamine withdrawal, there's still a part of me that's holding on to wakefulness. It's the part of me that craves closure. I shamble my way over to Teddy's room. The tape is paused on the opening shot of the fast food restaurant. Teddy still stands behind the counter wearing the red uniform he wore before, but he looks calmer. I grab the remote and press play. The customers still don't eat their burgers. The line still doesn't advance. The audience still ushers in the walking nightmare with excited applause. "I am Professor Egghead," the egg-shaped abomination screams from the television. "I demand the grilled carcass of an animal between 2 pieces of processed wheat. I must receive nourishment before I indulge in the science."
Sorry, sir," Teddy whimpers like he did before. "There are other customers. If you just wait your place in line."
"There are no other customers than me, Professor Egghead," the professor screams as he drags down the innocent bystanders to their death. "I demand flesh and bread. I demand fuel for my body so that I can commit my mind to science."
"Please, sir, don't hurt the other customers," Teddy begs.
"I will destroy all that is in my path in the name of science. Bring me a feast worthy of a philosopher king." By the time the mad scientist is standing in front of Teddy, the kid is visibly shaking, but he still manages to get his lines out.
"Okay, Mr. Egghead, what can I get you?"
"I am a professor," the egg-shaped man screeches. "I have attended all of the universities in the world. My walls are lined with degrees that you have never even conceived of. I have dedicated my life to the pursuit of knowledge, and I will be addressed with the respect I deserve."
"I'm sorry, Professor Egghead. What can I get you?"
"I want the finest meat which the slaughterhouse can provide, served on buns of processed virgin wheat."
"Oh, sorry, we don't have that item on the menu," Teddy says. "But if you want, I can call my manager."
"Yes, I wish to communicate with the king of this eatery, not a mere cog in the dining machine. Call forth the master of the food so that I can be given the banquet I demand."
"Dad," Teddy yells. "Dad, Professor Egghead wants to speak to you."
The red uniform barely fits around the man's paunch, and Teddy's father looks unsure of his movements. Yet when he places his hand on his son's shoulder, a smile comes across his face.
"Hello, I'm the manager of this fast food restaurant," he says. "How can I help you?"
Father and son working together. This is the true meaning of family. This is the true meaning of love," Professor Egghead screams as the studio audience lets forth a round of awes. "The only love which I know is my undying love of science. I have only lab beakers and microscopes to hug. The Egghead is so alone." Professor Egghead's admission of loneliness makes the audience explode with laughter. Watching the father and son stand together in front of the unhinged monstrosity brings a smile to my face. Even past the roaring pain that claws at my body, I can appreciate a happy ending. I find myself laughing along with the invisible crowd. But then, I stop. Beep. A familiar supermarket flickers on the screen of the television. The checkout lane is still empty. Beep. The balding man stands at the front of the line with his cart. He's looking at me.
"There's no escape from Professor Egghead," he says. "Many have tried and none have succeeded. His demands will always be met. Just follow the script and..."
The visage on the screen explodes into a burst of electricity and shattered glass. After throwing the remote through the television, I rip out the VCR and stomp it into tiny bits of plastic. As I destroy the place from where Professor Egghead first came, I find myself weeping. I find myself weeping for my lost soul. No amount of tears or force, however, can stop the unstoppable. Beep. Professor Egghead's demands are always met. As I write this, I'm lying on my couch, a bruised-up corpse wavering in and out of consciousness. I've resigned myself to my fate. I know that I will be part of Professor Egghead's adventures soon. I know I can't fight destiny anymore.
If there's one thing which I can leave you with, if there's one thing I can give to this world before I'm forced into the demented dimension in which the Egghead makes his demands, it's a warning. If you ever find a VHS tape titled Professor Egghead's Adventures, do not watch it. Well, what an incredible story to start you off on a Monday with. Wow. As soon as I read that, I thought, well, I have to read that to all of you. Fantastic work from Mike Langer there. Beautiful story, and as ever, thanks for giving me permission to read that one. Did some guest work over on his channel recently, and yeah, just some really great stories, and I'm glad to have made his acquaintance and to be reading some of his stories. Please pop over to his channel, check out all of his work. Really some great stuff there. Well, that's a good way to start Monday off, isn't it? Back again tomorrow, maybe on my other channel, but definitely back here on a Wednesday. I've got some really, really long stories lined up for you, some modern-day classics, dare I say. So, stick with me. Good stuff coming up. That's enough for one evening, so until next time, very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.